Jesus said some weird stuff. That's what I've been wrestling with this morning. I mean, I don't know if we give the early Christians, or really the early audience of the gospel, enough credit. Because, my goodness, the stuff that Jesus was saying was actually kind of strange. I mean, I've been guilty at times of almost being like, how did they not get it? I mean, he's doing all these miracles and he's preaching all these amazing sermons. Like, how could they miss that this is the Christ? But then I remember, oh yeah, I'm actually relying on 2,000 years of us wrestling with these very strange sayings, of this weird way of talking, of this very odd way of calling. And they were hearing it for the very first time. And they were hearing it without 2,000 years of wrestling with it. Let me give you an example of one of those passages that to us, it seems just kind of like, yeah, I mean, that's a key passage. That's just something that's at the heart of the gospel. But then what I want to do is I want to try to go into the text and look at it through the eyes of a couple of different people in the audience. Hopefully, then, we can appreciate the scandalous nature of Christ's call. The difficulty of not only seeing him as the Christ, but embracing what it is he is calling them to. It's Mark chapter 8, verse 34. Then Jesus called the crowd to him along with his disciples and said, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." This is a passage that we're so familiar with that we almost trivialize it. You know, I mean, I'll hear it at times here at the Bible College at Ozark. I'll hear at times people, you know, in the hallways, and the students are struggling with a big, long memory work, and they'll be like, well, you know, I guess it's just my cross to bear. Or, you know, somebody will have a flat tire, or will be having a long week, a busy schedule, and they'll be like, I guess that's my cross to bear. And they're referencing in shorthand this text, that if anyone wants to be my disciple, they must deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. Now, here's the thing that is fascinating. It is so familiar to us that we're able to trivialize it. But if you are listening to this through the eyes of the audience when Jesus said it, this is a reason to leave the calling. To actually look at him and say, this is absurd. Let's look at this through the lens of a Roman. See, since this is John chapter 8, when they hear the cross and Jesus speaking to it, they're not thinking salvation. They're not thinking redemption for my sins, dying in my place, atoning sacrifice. That's not what they're thinking. If you are a Roman, then a cross had a specific purpose. It was reserved for a particular type of people. If you were a Roman, a cross was reserved for a political revolution. It is reserved for a political insurrectionist. It is reserved specifically for a failed revolution. You see, not just anybody was hung on a cross. It's not like, oh, you stole a piece of bread in the market. Well, the cross for you. Like, it wasn't like that. No, they reserved the cross for a specific message. Rome was always trying to control through fear. And at times when you're dealing with a big political insurrection, an uprising, it can be difficult for you to figure out who was involved and how many people were involved. And so what you would do is you would get the key leader, you would torture them, you would publicly humiliate them, and you would publicly execute them to send a message to everyone else that if you mess with Rome, this is your fate. So whenever Jesus comes and he says, if you want to be my disciple, you must deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me, a Rome would have heard this. A Roman would have heard, are you asking me to join your failed revolution? What kind of a call is that? I mean, it's not even like you're asking me to pick up arms and go fight. You're saying, hey, if you want to follow me, get ready to join my revolution that fails. It's no wonder for the Gentiles, this is a foolishness. 1 Corinthians 1. Foolish, this doesn't make any sense. It gets even worse once we look at it through the lens of a Jew. You see, for a Jew who was well versed in the law, they would have been thinking something a little different. They would have been thinking back to a passage embedded in Deuteronomy. A passage in Deuteronomy that has been referenced in the New Testament in passing in some of the Pauline letters. But this is the passage they would have been wrestling with. Deuteronomy chapter 21, verses 22 and following. If someone guilty of a capital offense is put to death, and their body is exposed on a tree, you must not leave the body hanging on the tree overnight. Why? Well, you need to be sure to bury it that same day, because anyone who hangs on a tree is under the curse of God. You see, if you're a Jew and you hear Jesus say, if you want to be my disciple, then you need to pick up your cross. You need to be willing to be hung on a tree. What you would be thinking, the interpretation of your mind is, to follow you, I need to be willing to be cursed by God? I need to be willing to entrust you so much that my entire relationship with God is on the line? To take up my cross? To hang on a tree? You see, Jesus' call through the eyes of the audience was not something that was comparable to a flat tire. It was a call to be willing to sacrifice everything. Logic, salvation, everything. To be one of His. Here's my question that I want to ask you today, that I want to challenge you to wrestle with this week. If Jesus asked the same thing of you today, how would you respond? Sometimes I wonder in my own heart if I follow Jesus more because of what I get, as opposed to the person that I get to engage and to be with. Sometimes I wonder if I wrestle in my own heart if I follow Jesus more because I get to go to heaven, or because I get to be intimate with the Creator of the universe, the King of Kings. That yes, at times violates my logic, that yes, at times challenges me with a calling that I'm not even comfortable with. And yet, whoever wants to be His disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow Him. And there is no in between. What are you not willing to give up to follow the King? My challenge you to this week is, give it up and fall more and more in love with Him. I love you guys. See you next week.